Not too recently, I got Zack Snyder's Justice League on Blu-ray. The first time I've actually watched it in almost 3 years since the film came out on streaming services on HBO Max during the pandemic. I love this movie, but I also hate it. And I'll explain why in a few moments, but the reason I love this movie is because it gave us a deeper insight of who these characters are. I mean, Ben Affleck was amazing as this reformed Batman, who's still a badass, but is still trying to believe in humanity, especially trying to live by the example Superman set for him in Batman vs. Superman, where he died. Aquaman, Jason Momoa, he was built for that character. And that's saying a whole lot, considering what kind of an actor he is. Big, strong, a bit of a comic relief type, but still one of the badasses. Gal Gadot, one of the most beautiful women in Hollywood right now, in the world if you want to be more specific. Her Wonder Woman, head and shoulders above anyone else who's played the character, except for the possibility of Linda Carter. I don't want to throw that out, but still sexy. Gal Gadot, sexy. Yes. Beautiful. Ezra Miller, before the still funny as hell as the Flash. And of course there's Henry Cavill, in one of the last times we'll ever see him as Superman. And it's unfortunate too, because there is so much they could do with him as Superman. But I'll get to that sooner or later. And everyone else on the cast, of course, Amy Adams as Lois Lane, Joe Morton as Silas Stone, Connie Nielsen as Wonder Woman's mother, Queen Hippolyta. I mean, Jeremy Irons as Alfred. There is so much about this movie that was so incredible. Yes, again, it is 4 hours long, and it is worth it. Every bit. Those 4 hours, maybe the longest that you ever watched, but some of the old-timey biblical movies like the Ten Commandments and the Greatest Story Ever Told were 4 hours long. I'm not trying to link the two of them. I'm not trying to compare the two to a superhero movie, but still worth it. Still worth it. And I loved it mainly because it gave us a bigger insight into Ray Fisher's character, Victor Stone, the cyborg. And I think Ray Fisher was born to play this particular character. In Justice League, in the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League, we get even deeper insight of who this person is, because a lot of people out there, a lot of comic book fans still don't know who the cyborg is or his background. This time, we see it happen. We see the quote-unquote origin story to his character. And it's both amazing and, unfortunately, it's tragic as well. The backstory of him being a star quarterback for Gotham University, the unfortunate separation between him and his father, the tragic car accident that claimed his mother's life and left him dying, and the madness of his father using one of the mother boxes to bring him back to life. Matter of fact, I'm sorry, I should have put a spoiler alert in the beginning of this movie, in the beginning of this video. But here we are. In any case, the reason I love this movie is because it gave us so much potential for what the DC Expanded Universe, or the DCEU as it's abbreviated. There was so much they could have done with these characters, so much they could have done with this universe, so much they could have done with this particular story. And unfortunately, for the reasons I hate it, it was abandoned. Now the reasons why I hate this movie. Now, the reasons I hate it is because this is the Justice League we should have seen when they released that other one in 2016. Now, the reason why it was done like this is because, of course, Zack Snyder left the production. His daughter passed away, and he didn't even hesitate. Who would? What person with a soul wouldn't say, no, I don't want to do this anymore, I have to go, I need to be with the rest of my family and get through this thing. If I were the head of Warner Brothers, I would have said production of Justice League would have stopped, the movie will be delayed, we won't show it, we won't premiere it until Zack Snyder returns, or if he returns. Losing a daughter, I can't testify to this, and I hope to God I will never have to talk about this. Losing a family member can have a chilling effect on you, regardless of what the situation is. So I understand why Zack Snyder walked out of the production and everything before it was all over. I get that, and I understand that. Warner Brothers should have stopped it there. Should have said, let's put everything on hold, let's wait until he gets back, and then we can finish. It might take a year or so, I don't care. His daughter passed away, it's time to move on. It's time for us to put this on pause. I think everyone in the crew and the cast would have said, absolutely, yes. Unfortunately, Warner Brothers didn't do that. They hired in another director to finish the film, Joss Whedon. Now, that name sounds familiar. Obviously, he was the creator of Firefly and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and more to the point, he was the director of the first two Avengers movies. The first Avenger, or Avengers Assemble if you're out of the US, and Avengers Age of Ultron. So he knows how to make movies. He knows how to make superhero movies. Unfortunately, that didn't work in his version of Justice League. It was a 2-hour snooze fest that had nothing to do with the major stories. It just made no sense at all. And unfortunately, that's the Justice League we got that year. But after all this time, I'm beginning to learn some very disturbing things about what was going on in the hierarchy of the Warner Brothers. They were trying to move away from what Zack Snyder was trying to do. They were trying to move away from the vision that he had for the Justice League and the rest of the DCEU. He wanted it pretty dark, he wanted it realistic, he wanted it grounded to reality. And that's not what Joss Whedon gave us. He gave us a terrible, Warner Brothers themselves gave us a terrible, terrible movie. And the real thing, and the fact is, you have to go back to the release of Man of Steel to understand where everything was birthed out of. Man of Steel was gritty. It was painful. It gave us everything we want in a Superman movie. In fact, it holds a special place in my heart because that was the first Superman movie I ever went to the theaters and saw. I was too young to see the Christopher Reeves movies, and I wasn't really enthusiastic for Superman Returns. So I was looking forward to seeing Man of Steel. In fact, it was the first ever movie I went to a midnight screening the day before it was actually released to the general public and saw, and it was worth it. And I'm thinking to myself, of course, we're going to get all these new DC movies, hopefully another Superman movie. But it took them years to make the quote-unquote sequel to it. And what did we get? Batman vs. Superman. Again, directed by Zack Snyder, along with Man of Steel. One of my favorites, yes, because it felt so real, especially that scene where we see Superman saving people, intercut with scientists and politicians wondering, does Superman, should Superman exist? Should there be a person like Superman doing these things, saving lives? But the only thing I have a problem with is killing off Superman way too early. Of course, by killing Superman, I'm talking about Doomsday killing him. Killing him off too soon was it just didn't work for me. Now, the original script for Justice League of obviously bringing Superman back to life, yes, but they should have had at least one Man of Steel sequel before that. They didn't do it. Warner Brothers was trying to rush. And that's another thing that's a problem. One of the main problems I was going to talk about. They were in competition with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Marvel Studios. Now, someone's going to say, Marvel versus DC, that's olden times. You're right. And the reason why both sides were successful is because they knew how to make their characters. I have a lot of characters in Marvel that I love, and a lot of DC characters I love, and both of them were represented on the screen in the Justice League, as well as a lot of them represented in the Avengers films, and the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole. But when you're trying to compete, making movies, you have to be very careful as to what movie you're making and how you're making it. The reason why the Marvel Cinematic Universe has lasted for 15 years to this very day, regardless of how many people want to criticize the new movies or the new streaming television shows on Disney Plus, they still work. And the reason why is because Marvel has had one, stable leadership in the hierarchy of Marvel and to a more extent Disney. Of course, I'm talking about the head of Marvel Studios, Kevin Feige, where Warner Brothers had no one who stayed in there for more than a couple of years. There was no stable leadership. There was no captain to steer the ship. So if to torture a metaphor. There was no leadership that was there more than a couple of years. And there was no clear vision. They didn't want Zack Snyder's vision of the DCEU, so they did everything they could to get rid of him. And that to me was wrong. Not because he made amazing movies, not only that, but because when you're trying to make movies that could compete with Marvel after the 15 years of success, that they had, well, at that point it was probably 10 or 12 years of success that they had before the release of the Snyder Cut of Justice League. You need to make sure that your vision is strong enough that it can compete with Marvel. Unfortunately, after Zack Snyder walked off of Justice League after the passing of his daughter, that vision started to plummet badly. Now, the DCEU before that time, they had a lot of successes and a lot of failures. But one of the big successes, well, two of the big successes, I should say, was Wonder Woman and Aquaman. Wonder Woman, one of the first female-led superhero movies that was a success. I'm sorry, Halle Berry, but I gotta say it. Catwoman sucked. Sorry. And you got Aquaman, a character that was seen more as a joke to that point. Then Jason Momoa took over the character, became a legend. The first and possibly only DCEU movie to make $1 billion at the box office. If you had followed the formula that Wonder Woman and Aquaman and gave you, these DC movies could possibly rival anything that Marvel came up with. Unfortunately, they didn't follow that formula. And the perfect example of that was Suicide Squad. The only reason why I would watch Suicide Squad is that, one, it had Will Smith, pre-Oscar slap Will Smith, Viola Davis, and Margot Robbie, three of the biggest talents out there. But again, it skewed away from what the director wanted. The director obviously being David Ayer. He wanted something that was gritty. He wanted something bloody. He wanted something graphic. It's about villains coming together to form a superhero team to save the world. But unfortunately, Warner Brothers was incredibly obsessed with trying to compete with Marvel, that was trying to make Suicide Squad into the Guardians of the Galaxy, an action science fiction comedy. And I love the Guardians of the Galaxy. Make no mistake about that. But if your director's vision is a gritty, hardcore drama, why would you change that? There's a phrase that describes that. It's called studio interference. That was one of the few things about studio interference that really hurt the DCEU. Another instance is where they cut 20 minutes off of Batman vs. Superman: The Dawn of Justice. And of course, the original cut of the Justice League, not the Snyder cut. There was so much that could have been done with the DCEU, but without clear leadership from Warner Brothers, it just didn't work. In fact, it made things worse. And because of that, one of the main reasons for that is because there were so many, what's the word I'm looking for? There are so many things going on with DC, merger after merger, business plan after business plan, people getting moved out, people getting moved in, and there was no clear line of where they wanted to go. And in the end of the day, DC comic movies suffered because of it. So when I look at Justice League's Snyder Cut, I see the lost potential that could have been the DCEU, especially in the last 30 minutes of that film. The heroes saved the day, they saved the earth, but in that very moment, all of them are face to face with Darkseid, his parademons, Granny Goodness, and Desaad. Almost in the same mustache twirling idea that we've seen with Thanos after the first Avengers and every subsequent appearance of him, from the Guardians of the Galaxy to Avengers Age of Ultron, all the way to the final shot of Sanctuary 1 in the end credit scene on Thor Ragnarok. That could have been perfection itself for Justice League if they went on with it. And from what I'm hearing about what Justice Leagues 2 and 3, because it's supposed to be a trilogy, from what I'm understanding what could possibly have happened, that would probably have dwarfed Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. Yeah, I said it. And I love those movies. But when we saw what DC was planning to do with Darkseid, and not to mention the nightmare scene we saw on Zack Snyder's Justice League, going even more in depth than just showing Batman fighting a bunch of Superman's troops and parademons, this time they went even more to the next level. Again, spoilers if you haven't seen it. We see Batman, Minerva from Atlantis, The Flash, and Cyborg and Deathstroke, played amazingly by Joe Manganiello. I completely screwed up his name. And all of them trying to figure out what they're going to do about Superman and why they're hiding in a dead, burning Earth that's obviously been already taken over and invaded by the forces of Darkseid. And another huge surprise, a surprise none of us saw coming, Jared Leto's Joker. Yeah, Jared Leto, the guy who won an Academy Award. Anyway, as much as I like this guy as an actor, When I first saw him in Suicide Squad as the Joker, I kept looking at the lens of Heath Ledger's Joker, may he rest in peace. I kept thinking that this guy is going to be as good as Heath Ledger. He wasn't. Sorry, Jared. But he gave us some very big insights as to what's happening in the dead Earth and what they were planning to do to reverse it all. The potential for that was unbelievably amazing if we got a chance to see it. Unfortunately, we did not. After Justice League, it was released in 2022. A couple of movies were given out, like what's the one I'm thinking of? Oh yeah, Shazam, The Fury of the Gods, the sequel to the first Shazam. Now, I liked the first one. I didn't really dig the second one. Wasn't my thing. It may have been successful in the box office, I don't know. But I wasn't really excited for it. Then, of course, the last year of the DCEU. Well, no, hold on. Actually, I'm skipping over one. The one that had Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, now known as the final boss. The final boss? Come on, Dwayne. Are you trying to be Shang Tsung from from Mortal Kombat? Oh, you must think you're King Koopa from the Super Mario Brothers. Come on, man. The final boss? Anyway, his movie that he produced, well, co-produced, excuse me, Black Adam. Now, I liked it mainly because Dwayne Johnson was in, and the attitude about that guy was incredibly powerful. However, the main reason I loved it was the end credit scene featuring someone that I was hoping that we have a head-on collision with. And that, of course, was Henry Cavill's Superman. Seeing him in the blue suit and the red S, we thought that he was going to make another movie, that he was going to get back in the DCEU. He actually waited the weekend after Black Adam was released to post an Instagram post saying that I'm back as Superman. And all of us were excited. Until weeks later when it was announced that he wouldn't be returning as Superman. It wasn't a decision by Henry Cavill, it was a decision by Warner Brothers. Why would you cut him out? Anyway, in 2023, the final slate of DC movies came out. Obviously, The Flash, which I went to go and see, and I liked it, but everything that Ezra Miller went through kind of soiled it for me. And of course, Aquaman 2. As much as I liked it, it didn't have the same impact as the first one did. Now, mind you, the first one was legendary. The second one, it didn't. The first one up here, the second one was about down here. And the DCEU ended. Corporate greed. Well, here the three reasons why the DCEU, in my opinion, was destroyed. Corporate greed. Too many people wanted too much money, too quick, too fast, and they were willing to destroy creativity to do it. 2, competition with Marvel. They were so obsessed with trying to catch up with Marvel that they sacrificed quality and sell it for quantity, if you understand what that means. 3, there was no clear leadership in the hierarchy of DC or Warner Brothers to get off the ground. 4, they tried to divorce away from a set path that Zack Snyder gave us, which was clearly laid out in his cut of Justice League. Those 4 reasons destroyed the DCEU. And now that we hear that James Gunn, the director of the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, is going to be taking over the reins of DCE Studios, and now calling his movie the DC Universe, or DCU. And I've already heard that they're not going to follow the same pattern that Zack Snyder did, so we're not going to get a Justice League Part 2 and 3 with the end game of taking on Darkseid. We're not going to see that. So as much as I love the Justice League Zack Snyder cut, I also hate it because it gave us something that we will never be able to see. That's my opinion on the Justice League film. That's my opinion of the whole DCEU. If you have another one, please type it in the comments below. Let's talk about this. Do you want to see Justice League Parts 2 and 3 with everyone back in it? Maybe we can get Ezra Miller somehow paroled and give him some anger management or whatever. I want to see what happens next. I'm hoping to see what happens next, because this was way too good just to leave it on the shelf, as it were. Let me know what you think.